Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Today, we have a presentation by Aldebaran Resources. This is their first webinar with us. They trade on the TSX Venture under the ticker ALDE and on the OTCQX under the ticker ADBRF. We're really excited to learn more about the company and the Altar Copper Gold Project in San Juan Province, Argentina. Joining us today, we have John Black, CEO. Before we begin, today's session will contain forward-looking statements. If you would like to learn more about those, you can find them on the company's website and on the presentation. There will be a Q&A section at the end, so if you have questions, please input them at the bottom of your screen. Welcome, John, and I know it's a busy week for you, so thank you for taking the time to join us, and looking forward to learn about the company and the project.
Okay, well, great. Thanks, Magda. And I'd like to give Deb and her team at Adelaide big thank you from our standpoint. It's a great opportunity for us to join up with Adelaide and go forward and hopefully present a really exciting story and a really timely story. We're working on a major copper discovery in South America, and there couldn't be a better time to be having a large copper project. So today what I'd like to do is give an introduction to Aldebaran and particularly our Altar Copper Gold Project. Talk a little bit about the project itself and Argentina. And for many of you that may have already known the story, this will be a bit of a review, but I think there'll be a lot of new people on this forum to be able to take a look at the project. So we will have room for question and answers at the end of this, so please bring any questions you might have. It's a great opportunity for us to interact with shareholders or potential shareholders and describe what we're doing. As Magda explained, we are a publicly listed company, so we're traded on the TSX-V exchange as well as over the counter in the US. So the appropriate disclaimers apply to what we'll present today. I thought I'd start with four key points, four key investment highlights. So these are the four key points that I'd like you to take away from today's presentation. One is that at Aldebaran, we're advancing one of the largest undeveloped copper deposits in the world. We already have a deposit, a big porphyry copper deposit that has a very large resource. We're earning 80% into the project. And in measured and indicated resource, there are over 11 billion pounds of copper and 3.4 million ounces of gold, as measured and indicated, with some additional inferred resources of 1.7 billion pounds of copper and 0.4 million ounces of gold. A large amount of this resource is already in the measured and indicated category, so a high degree of confidence in the mineralization. Now, having said that, and having this already being a deposit of the size that would be of interest to a major company, we believe that this project has tremendous opportunities to grow. We're currently drilling with 4 drill rigs, and what we'll touch on today is that we believe we've only discovered a portion of the deposit, and we're beginning to put out a series of press releases that will reveal just how big this deposit might be. We're also located in an emerging hotbed for mining. We're in San Juan Province in Argentina. And for some of you that may not be familiar with Argentina, Argentina has not historically been known as a mining country, but the rocks are the same as we see in Chile on the other side of the border. It just hasn't had that history of mining development. So there are some fantastic opportunities for the development of large copper, gold, and lithium projects in Argentina. And we're just seeing that emerge right now with a lot of investor interest and entry of major mining companies into the country and into San Juan Province in particular. And our fourth point on this is that we're the right management team and we have quality partners to execute our strategy. Our management team has an intentional strategy of discovering large copper deposits, drilling those out and selling them to major mining companies. We've executed our strategy once. One of our previous companies, we drilled out a large deposit that we sold to First Quantum Minerals for a very nice return for our shareholders. We also have some great partners to execute this project as we move forward. We're earning into the project from Sibanye Stillwater. South 32 came in as a strategic partner last year for a 9.9% equity position and a lot of great technical help for us moving the project forward. And we have a major shareholder named Group 1 Investments out of San Francisco that has been a long-term backer for us moving forward. So great share registry, great significant strategic partners to move forward. So I thought we'd be good for us to review just a little bit about our strategy as a company. When a junior company starts, they need to determine what type of a strategy, where they'll fit in this. Or there are companies that focus on greenfields or focus only on a certain commodity or only a certain country. Aldebaran is actually the third company of 3 that have been under our same management team. And all 3 of the companies, we have the same strategy. We can see the strategy numbered 1, 2, 3 across the top of the diagram. What we attempt to do is to identify projects that have the potential to be large copper or copper gold deposits with all the indications that will be economically robust. So the size of a deposit and the type of a deposit that would be of interest to a major mining company. We acquire those when the market's down or when the person that, or company that has the project is looking for a partner to come in on it. And then we add value to those projects by expanding or defining the resource and de-risking the project through approximately a pre-feasibility stage. And then we finalize our business strategy by monetizing that project and selling it to a major mining company. We're not mine builders. We're very good at identifying these opportunities and drilling them out and showing the full potential value. But ideally, we pass that on to the company that would be the eventual developer of the project. This is to focus on what our skill sets are. It's also to shorten the investment time frame to be more consistent with what our investors would like to see. But there's a lot of value added between discovery and pre-feasibility, but a lot of times it's a long time to get from pre-feasibility into when you add value again, when you put it into production. It requires different skill sets and oftentimes doesn't increase value for our shareholders. We refer to it as Death Valley in that period between pre-feas and mine development. So ideally, we sell those at that point in time. Our first company was called Antares Minerals. We had the good fortune to drill out the Hiquira deposit in southern Peru. We sold that project for $650 million to First Quantum in 2010. So we have executed our strategy once. We learned a tremendous amount in that process. I think we came into it as exploration geologists focusing on the project and the nature of the deposit, which is of fundamental importance, but there's a lot more to it than just that, and we learned quite a bit in that process. From Antares, we spun out Regulus Resources, which is focused on a very exciting copper gold project called Antucory in northern Peru. And the opportunity came out for us to put our hands on the Altar project, and we did that by forming a second company, Aldebaran. So our same management team has two companies, Regulus Resources and Aldebaran, each of which have a very exciting major copper discovery and the type of project that I think the major companies will be looking for. So how did we acquire the Altar deposit? While we were setting up Regulus and working on the Antucory project in northern Peru, we were aware of the Altar project. It's a project that has had an extensive amount of previous drilling, but it had been one that had gotten stuck. It was in the hands of a company that wasn't the correct company to develop the project moving forward. So this project was largely drilled out by a junior exploration company called Peregrine Metals in the early 2000s up to 2011. And in 2011, Peregrine Metals sold the project and the company to Stillwater Mining for just short of $500 million. So they effectively executed the same business plan that we have done once successfully with our Antares company. However, the project never really fit in Stillwater Mining. Stillwater is a platinum producer with a stable mine in the US, and an early stage copper exploration project in the high Andes in South America really didn't fit. So it got stuck within Stillwater. When Sibanye acquired Stillwater, it opened up an opportunity for us to see if we could enter into the project. So when that happened, we approached Sibanye Stillwater with an offer to acquire the project. And the agreement that we have is that we can acquire up to an 80% interest in the project by making an initial payment of $15 million and providing Sibanye Stillwater with 19.9% equity in Aldebaran. That's been completed. We're now in the stage of earning into a 60% interest in the project by spending $30 million in the ground on the project. We have completed that expenditure. We're in the process of documenting that and providing the information to Sibanye Stillwater to execute the first stage where we'll acquire 60% interest in the project. That will happen quite soon now. And we're beginning to start earning into the 80%. So we'll have to spend $25 million over the next 3 years to acquire that additional 20%. Upon completion of this, it'll be an 80-20 joint venture between ourselves and Sibanye Stillwater moving forward. So very, very attractive terms for us to enter into a project that's already a very large project. It was already large enough that a major mining company purchased it, just didn't end up in the right position to be developed. We saw potential to dramatically increase the resource. So we're not simply picking up a project that's already been drilled out and known. We see it as that plus a lot more, which we'll get into shortly. So the resultant share structure after our agreement on how we can earn into the project is shown here. In the pie diagram, we can see that we have three large strategic investors. A fund out of San Francisco called Route 1 Investment Company owns just over 44% of Aldebaran. This is because they put up the initial funds for us to acquire the project moving forward. Route 1 has been a long-term investor in all of our companies. They strongly support what we're moving forward. And like us, they believe that these opportunities are increasingly rare and difficult to find. So they asked us if we identify a project like this to put our hands on it, and they would provide funding to help us acquire it, which they have. We're earning in from Sibanye Stillwater. They started with a 19.9% equity position. That's diluted back a little bit to 16.5 right now, as they did not participate in a couple of over-market financings that have just happened. Most notably, South 32 made a strategic investment into us last year to acquire a 9.9% interest in the company. That's temporarily been diluted down to 9.3 when we had a number of in-the-money warrants exercised over the past few weeks. But they do have top-up rights to increase their interest back to a 9.9, and we anticipate we might hear from them in the very near future regarding those. So those three strategic investors plus our position as insiders means there's less than a 25% float in the company. We have a current market capitalization of just over $100 million. And we have coverage from Paradigm with David Davidson, and more recently with Desjardins. Jonathan Ichilo established coverage in February of this year after a site visit and has put a $1.65 target on the company moving forward. And we'll see that we're delivering the type of results that he anticipated we'd be able to do. This is just a quick shot of the last 3 years of our share price and how it's moved forward. We're quite pleased with the progression on this. As we'll see, we believe we're strongly undervalued still, but at least we're moving in the right direction. So you can see from the bottom in mid-2020, post-COVID, or the announcement of COVID, we've had a pretty steady climb since that period in time, and we've had financings that are walking up in the right direction. A 2020 financing of 30 cents, followed by 2021 at 45, followed by the strategic placement at 78 cents from South 32 last year. We've had a recent little dip in the share price as we had warrants from the 2021 financing come due that were well in the money, and we're well aware that some shareholders sold some of their shares to obtain cash to exercise those warrants going forward. We believe that's probably a temporary dip. It creates a heck of a buying opportunity right at this moment. So let's start looking more closely at Argentina itself. On the right-hand side of the diagram, we can see a map of Argentina, and we've highlighted the provinces that are along the western border in the Cordillera of the Andes, along the border between Chile and Argentina. And we've color-coded those based on whether they're mining-friendly or not mining-friendly. Argentina is a little bit different than some other South American countries. It's a federation of states, so each individual province can have a lot of autonomy on whether they prefer to have mining developed or not developed, not terribly different than, say, Canada or the US. As a result, there are provinces that are very mining friendly, like San Juan, where we're located, Salto Jujuy in the north, or Santa Cruz in the south, while there are other provinces that are not particularly open to having mining investment. So you have to be very careful where you invest in Argentina. But the provinces that are very pro-mining right now are outstanding places to invest in. And what we've highlighted on this is a recent development. Over the past 1 to 2 years, we've seen a number of major investments into mining projects in Argentina. Particularly what we'd like to flag is that these are being made in many cases by large international companies like Rio Tinto, BHP, South 32, where they're coming in and either acquiring projects, lithium projects in the case of up in Salto and Jujuy, or making major strategic placements into companies like ourselves. This is a relatively new development, and we think it strongly endorses the shift in Argentina towards developing a major mining industry. Historically, these large international companies would be a bit risk adverse, and we're monitoring that. The rocks are great in Argentina, but the environment hasn't been the most conducive for investment. That's changing, and there's no better evidence than that than when we can show these major investments that are being made by companies coming in. In this diagram, we're zooming in more closely on the province of San Juan, where the Altar project is located. We can see the outline of the province, and we can see along the western border, there's a concentration of deposits right up against the border with Chile. These are both large copper and large gold deposits. The major gold mining complex of Veladero is a major Barrick mine. That combined with the Macomayo deposit have been two modern mines developed in San Juan in the recent past, and they've made a notable improvement to the economy in San Juan. And it's also shifted the public perception of mining towards an industry that provides good paying jobs and good tax benefits for the betterment of everyone in the province. So mining is notably well accepted in the province. And from government officials down to people on the street, there's a lot of interest in developing additional mines. Our project is one of 5 major copper deposits right along the border. In the very northern part of the province, we have Jose Maria and Filo. These are both Lundin Company projects that have been in the news a lot lately, major projects moving forward. And then we're one of 3 undeveloped copper deposits in the southwest corner of the province. You can see Altar highlighted with a gold or copper colored star. And we sit right between 2 other major undeveloped projects. 50 kilometers to the north of us is Los Azules, McEwen Mining's large copper deposit. And 25 kilometers to the south of us is El Pachón, held by Glencore, also a very large copper deposit, which is immediately across the border from the Los Pelambres mine of Antofagasta, a major copper mine in full production right now at the same elevation as our projects in this area. All 4 of these deposits in the immediate area of our project are multi-billion ton moderate grade porphyry deposits. They're the type of deposits that are sought after by the major mining companies. The 3 undeveloped deposits in Argentina, Los Azules, Altar, and El Pachón, quite frankly, would all be mines now if they had been located 30 kilometers to the west in Chile. So an outstanding opportunity to develop not just our project, but a number of major copper deposits along the western margin of the San Juan province. On the right-hand side of the diagram is some information that was just put out a little over a week ago, actually. This is the Fraser Institute. They put out an attractiveness index that indicates how provinces or countries are viewed by the mining industry in terms of attractiveness for investment for both exploration and development of mining projects. And we're very pleased and very much agree with this. The survey results that just came out, it shows that San Juan province is the #1 ranked destination for investment, or most attractive destination for investment in Latin America, so Mexico South, and number 19 worldwide. So this is a notable improvement and is very consistent with the efforts that we've seen on behalf of the government to promote mining and facilitate us being able to work and invest in the province. So very exciting news on this coming out moving forward, and fully consistent with our experience in San Juan and what we understand of the province. On this diagram, we see an oblique view of a conceptual pit that constrains the current resource that we report for the deposit. So this is the official resource that we report. We notice on the right-hand side of the diagram a summary of the grades and the tonnages of the deposit, or the grades and the contained metals of deposits moving forward. As I mentioned, we have over 11 billion tons of copper in measured and indicated, over 13 if we combined all resource categories, with an additional large amount of gold and silver associated with this deposit. It's predominantly a gold deposit. Probably 90% of the anticipated revenues will be predominantly a copper deposit. More than 90% of the revenues will come from copper, but significant contributions from gold and silver, and also molybdenum in the lower portions of the deposit. So this size of deposit already clears the threshold to be the size to be of interest to a major mining company. However, as we'll see shortly, we think we're just beginning to scratch the potential of this project moving forward. This is a cross-section looking to the north, an east-west cross-section looking to the north of the entire district that hosts the Altar project. And like many porphyry copper projects, it's actually a series or a cluster of porphyry centers. So the resource that we just looked at is reported from the Altar Central and Altar East deposits. Both of those fall within the same conceptual pit indicated by the white dashed line. So all of the reported resource sits within inside this pit with significant mineralization beneath that, as we'll see shortly. We also have a relatively new center emerging to the west called the radioporphyry. Some very, very encouraging results there, but we currently do not report that into resource. When we next do our resource update, we'll evaluate pulling some of this into the resource. Very interesting mineralization, but a little bit deeper, and we may need to contemplate bulk underground mining to exploit this resource to the west. So this is very similar to what we knew the deposit would be like when we acquired it. But what we were most encouraged about is the potential for the Altar Central and Altar East projects to extend to depth and to discover new zones like Radio and several others that are not on this particular section. Note the scale across the bottom. This is 7 kilometers east to west. So it's a very large district as we move forward. And I'd also like to point out in the conceptual pit, we'll see that there's a bit of a septum between the two lobes of the pit. So the pit chases the mineralization deeper where we have greater drill density, and then it rises in a little septum between the two lobes of the pit in the middle. This is predominantly due to no drilling in the area in between. And we'll see this is where we focused some of our recent work, and we're getting some very exciting deposits that looks like we may see that the Altar Central and Altar East are part of essentially a much larger deposit that's unified by that central area. And we're now referring to the project really as Altar United to mention the entire project moving forward. So this is another view of effectively what we had when we started on the project. So we see that same conceptual pit in the dash or in the black line with the bench steps on it down below. And here we see Altar Central, fairly well represented in this section. We're just slicing through the north part of Altar East on this section. When we acquired the project, this long drill hole 212 did not exist. So the drilling that existed on the project was predominantly at depths of 300 to 500 meters deep. So modern open pit mines go considerably deeper than that. So it really was just testing the upper portion of it, and the drilling had stopped at that point in time. And we saw numerous holes that had mineralization to depth. Shortly after entering into the project, we completed hole 212 with a long run of mineralization that we see on this. So this proved our concept that we anticipated there'd be mineralization to depth, but then we had to determine how we were going to go from this point. The project had a lot of drill data on it. It had been systematically drilled out, fairly close space drilling to give a large percentage of the known mineralization in measured and indicated categories. But we really didn't have much systematic geochemistry work or geophysical work on the project, not even a very complete geologic map over the surface. So the first couple of years of the project, we invested a lot of time into collecting data sets like these. These are type data sets that we like to have to properly explore a district. And that's what is expected by the major mining companies when they get interested in a project like that. And we came up with some very pleasant surprises as we develop these data sets moving forward that will help us further test this hypothesis that there might be more mineralization at depth. So hole 212, which was drilled in 2019, had over 1.4 kilometers of 0.53% copper equivalent. So very long run of typical porphyry grades. That hole was 2 kilometers long and it terminated in mineralization at depth. Last year, as one of the final pieces of these data sets that we've been collecting moving forward, we completed the first deep-looking 3D IP resistivity survey. This allowed us to look much deeper geophysically than we'd been able to on the project. And we had a very pleasant surprise when this came in. This is the red colors, the warm colors on this outline a large conductivity anomaly. And we can see, particularly in Altar Central, that when the existing drill holes enter into that anomaly, they become well mineralized. And hole 212 was very well mineralized right through the guts of the anomaly and then continued with lower grade mineralization as it went out on the bottom. This was very exciting news to us and indicated rather than being two centers and that we might be chasing roots beneath East and Central, that it looked like it was a much more contiguous body. This is a large geophysical anomaly. It's 3 kilometers by 3 kilometers by up to 2 kilometers in vertical extent. And it suggested that our hypothesis that there might be mineralization between the two zones could very well be true. So as we received this data last year, we had hole 221 underway, cutting right through the heart of that anomaly. And we had a very nice confirmation of our hypothesis on this when 221 returned a little over a kilometer, 0.4%. These long runs of a kilometer plus of mineralization often bulk out in the 0.4 to 0.5 range. with shorter runs in interior runs in the 0.6 to 0.7 range, highlighted by the hotter colors. And we can see once again, very good correlation between the mineralization in this hole and the anomaly. And that was a 700-meter offset. And more importantly, indicated that in this septum, that the pit didn't take before simply because there was no data there, that it's well mineralized. So you can very easily imagine flattening out and deepening this pit. It has immediate access to this mineralization that we're drilling. And 700 meters is an extremely large step out. This got us very excited last year. It looked like we were on to even a bigger deposit than we imagined and more of an open pit geometry. So this year we embarked on a program. We're currently drilling with 4 drill rigs, and we're attempting to test this anomaly across the extent of it to see if this hypothesis continues to hold out. We've reported 2 batches of drill results to date. Hole 223 was reported about a month and a half ago, and were the first results from this year's field campaign, a 500-meter offset from hole 221. And once again, we hit a very nice intercepted mineralization, almost 1.2 kilometers of 0.48% copper, with that higher grade zone and bottoming in mineralization. This is one of the big battles we have inside the company right now. Our geos would like to keep running these holes to greater depths on it, but we'd like to focus now on getting more holes laterally so we can more quickly determine the size of this and how much of this falls into an open pit geometry. With time, we'll be able to continue to go deeper in the best parts as we move forward. And then late last week, we put out the second batch of results, which included hole 224. Once again, hitting a nice long run of mineralization. We had about 770 meters of 0.55% copper equivalent. Once again, correlating very well with the previous holes. There's a little bit of an optical illusion on this hole. You can see it's 390 meters to the west of hole 223. And it looks like it's immediately adjacent to 221, but these drill in different angles. So they're almost 200 meters apart on the bottom of the hole. So what we'll be attempting to do is fill in this figure with drill holes spaced at approximately 200 meter spacing to allow us to move towards an inferred resource and report the full size of the project. This is an oblique view. We're turning around and looking back to the south now. So we see that same anomaly that we're working on. We've collapsed all of the drill holes onto this figure. So that makes a great density of holes on this, because many of them are coming from quite far off the figure and being collapsed. But you can get an idea of the drilling that defines Altar East and Altar Central. And the 3 holes that have been reported to date on this section are 221, 223, and 224. We've highlighted hole 225B in magenta. This hole is complete and will be reported in the next batch of drill holes that come out. And then we'll continue to fill in with long holes defining this anomaly moving forward and capturing mineralization immediately below the pit. You can see the outline of the pit here. We can also see that the geophysics correlates very well with the mineralization we're chasing over at radio, and shows the challenge we have there, that it's more vertical style mineralization. So it probably will take deeper drilling and most likely be an underground mining scenario moving forward. Just to begin to wrap up on this, what I'd like to do is kind of point out more about the investment opportunity. We've talked about the project and the setting. It's a classic porphyry setting in the high Andes. Very large deposit when we entered into the agreement to acquire up to 80% in the project. And we're on the cusp of showing that it's even more significantly larger than what we thought it would be when we started on the project. But what does that mean in terms of an investment opportunity? So this is information that's pulled right out of John Agilo's report. John initiated coverage on us with Desjardins in February, just after a site visit to see the project. We can see on the right-hand side of the diagram, he's indicated that he's put a $1.65 target on us and a buy rating for us. And I'd like to particularly pull out this quote. It says, if the geophysics target continues to deliver strong results, we believe Aldebaran has the potential to double or possibly more than double the current resource. Since he put this information out, we've got 2 more strong hits into the anomaly, and it's continuing to deliver as we expect. So we fully agree with John's analysis on this and that potential for the deposit to increase significantly. What John also pointed out in his report is this is a graph that shows a basket of our peers. So these are all companies, all Canadian listed junior companies that have large undeveloped copper deposits, the type of project that a major might be interested in acquiring. And in many cases, most of us would not be the logical developer of the project. We'd likely be positioning ourselves to sell these projects. And the left-hand axis, we can see enterprise value, or approximately market cap for most of us, per pound of copper equivalent in the ground. This is one way to measure the valuation of a company like us. We don't have a PEA out yet, so we can't see those project economics at this point. But we can compare ourselves to others by taking a look at how much copper we have, what our market caps are, and therefore what our market cap or adjusted market cap enterprise value is per pound in the ground. We're currently valued at less than a half a penny per pound of copper equivalent that we have in the ground on the project. We can see some of our peers that are more advanced, that have PEAs and pre-feasibility studies, are moving more up into that 3-cent range. Filo is a bit of an exception. They have an incredibly high valuation, part of the nature of the project and the type holes they're drilling, but much of that recent drilling hasn't been converted into a resource yet. So it's a bit of an anomaly there. In our experience, these projects are typically acquired at about 4 cents per pound in the ground, or approximately 1% of in situ value, when major mining companies pick those up. So we have an immediate opportunity at Aldebaran to increase our valuation by continuing to de-risk the project and moving that towards a PEA and a pre-feasibility study. But keep in mind, we'll also be substantially increasing the size of the deposit at the same time. So there's a very good possibility of a multiple increase in value for shareholders for Aldebaran, whereas sometimes when you're more to the right side of this diagram, they can still be very good projects, but much of that value has already been added. So I would argue you want to be on the left side of this diagram, as long as the companies on the left side have great projects and an experienced management team to move forward. I hope I've demonstrated that the Aldebaran project is an incredibly interesting project. It has all the earmarks to be of interest to a major company. We are interacting with a number of those obvious companies like South 32 that we can see on our share registry, but a number of other major companies monitoring us as we move forward. So I think it's a fantastic time for investors to take a look at us. So here's a quick summary of the upcoming catalyst at Aldebaran. This is an important element when you take a look at a company like us to invest. Will there be news flow? Will there be new information coming? So there'll be multiple results from the current drilling campaign. As I mentioned, we have 2 releases out from this season's campaign. That's 4 drill holes announced to date. We have at least 8 more holes to be announced over the coming months, hopefully a few more depending on how late the season goes. We're currently drilling with 4 rigs. We'll drill just as late as we can. We're in South America, so winter hits mid-year. We typically take a break from about June to about September. But right now the weather's holding well, so we'll get as much drilling done as we can. By the time we're done releasing those results, we'll be in a position to talk about a larger drilling campaign starting off. We'll go back into the camp in September and be drilling by October of next year. As I mentioned, we've effectively completed the 60% earn-in to Altar. Once that's documented, we will be able to announce that moving forward. That's an important milestone for us. The larger drill program for next year, we're not in a position to announce that yet, but we're currently looking to acquire additional drill rigs to be more aggressive next year moving forward. The only thing that's more difficult to find than drill rigs in San Juan right now are experienced drillers and some replacement parts. It's kind of crazy there. There's a lot of activity going on, a lot of work going there at the moment. We'll continue our ESG programs to de-risk the project. That's an important element of moving a project like this forward. And we'll be preparing ourselves for putting out a resource update, which might come as an interim this year, and then a more full, more complete resource update after the 23-24 drill campaign, and leading towards a PEA most likely in the latter part of 2024, once we have the full size of the deposit really indicated or mostly indicated. So just as an investment recap, we're already on a project that has a large deposit, arguably sufficiently large now to be of interest to major companies, about to get much larger as we move forward. We have good news flow with multiple drill holes pending for the next few months, and a major campaign kicking off as soon as we can later this year. We're growing that already significant resource. We're in a great province by Fraser Institute, the top-ranked mining jurisdiction in Latin America for mining investment. And more importantly, when you look at a company like this, at this stage with Aldebaran, there's a very compelling valuation. We've been moving our share price steadily up as the results have been coming out, but I don't think we're fully on the map right now. So this is a great time to take a look at a project like ourselves. Copper's moving into a situation where we simply will not be able to deliver enough copper as an industry, and these type projects will be highly sought after by major companies. We anticipate that we'll likely see increased copper prices probably next year at some point. Those increased copper prices are likely to kick off a lot of interest in our sector, and I think we'll be delivering a fantastic project exactly at the right time. We don't need those higher prices for our projects to be viable, but when those higher prices come, that's when the major mining companies get cashed up and get pushed to show that they have growth strategies and opportunities to increase their production, and they go hunting for projects just like ourselves. So I think that's a good point to stop right now, and be happy to turn things over to questions from the audience.
All right. Well, thank you, John. The first question is just about the Altair acquisition. What was it about the project that made you interested in adding this asset to the portfolio?
The project, what really caught our eye on this, we knew it was a large project. It was known as a large, relatively low-grade project that might have some challenges with arsenic. But what really caught our ear on this project was Stillwater, after they acquired it, they continued to drill on the project, but it was as a non-core asset for them, so those results weren't reported publicly. But we knew the guys well that were working on the project. They presented some very interesting data informally at a informal geo gathering that happened once a month in Santiago in those days. It was geo beer night basically, and each month someone would present something on what they're working on in the project, and they started indicating some very long runs of very attractive copper and gold grades on the project, very different than what we knew in new zones. So we realized there was potentially a lot of room for this to grow much more than it was already known. And when we visited on site, that confirmed it. We saw just some of the best leach cap indications on the surface you could ever imagine on it, a very, very large system, and lots of areas that hadn't been tested, particularly at depth, but also complete zones that I haven't even mentioned today that warrant additional drilling. So we realized that this was a pretty special deposit. It had all the indications that it could become much larger. And now that we're getting into full stride on the project, we're beginning to show that.
Exciting stuff. And then just touching on the option agreement, you have the option to get to 80 after you've completed the 60 spend over a 3-year period. Can you accelerate that with an accelerated exploration spend?
Yes, we can go as fast as we can on the project to go forward. We've completed the initial spend of 30 well within the time. We had 5 years to do that initial spend, and we're ahead of schedule on that. Once we have that document and finished, that'll start a 3-year period for us to complete the $25 million. And as quickly as we do, I don't think we'll take anything close to that full 3 years to do that.
Okay, awesome. And we've got some technical questions, one from the audience. Seems like a lot of the new resources are at depth. What is the cutoff for a project like this when it comes to open pit versus underground mining?
It's a great question, and one that it depends a lot on the setting. You have to put some other factors. So I can give some general guidelines. One, as far as an average porphyry grade, what we saw in the Andes 30 years ago that 1% might be kind of a typical grade as people were still exploiting some of the large secondary enrichment blankets. Those are largely mined out, and now we're seeing that most of the major mines are seeing a downward trend in their copper grades, and a typical grade for production off of major copper deposit now is more in that sort of 0.5% range. When we model a big open pit on this, we typically use a 0.3 cutoff to demonstrate the resource moving forward. But in reality, when you move to a PEA stage, you'll take a look at a break-even cutoff, which is the point at which you make money by moving the rock. And in a big system like this, That's common. It varies depending where you're at in the system, but it commonly is on the order of 0.15% copper. So it can go quite low in terms of you're moving volume. You're moving very large volumes of rock, and that would be a break-even point on this. So our grades are very consistent with that right now. You do have to factor in other things like strip ratio and metallurgical recovery and a number of other factors like this. But so the type grades we're reporting are more typical of open pit grades. When you go underground for bulk underground, you need much higher grades to do that. And it depends a lot on the nature of the rocks. Is it rock that breaks up easily and drops and you can do in a bulk mining sense, or is it really tight, hard rock that requires a lot of explosives to break it apart? And so typically for a bulk underground grade, you want to have an average grade of at least 0.7, 0.8, and a lot of it in an ideal geometry, preferably getting closer to 1% to be bulk underground. Your actual cutoff grade will be lower than that around it for break even, but you need that core of higher grade material to move forward. So we're looking for sort of 0.7 and up to be of interest for bulk underground mining. To get that starter point on it, and anything 0.3 and above is very good for open pit.
Got it. Thank you. And then a question about your latest drill results. Your last two drill press releases, so in March and in May of this year, they both had like mineralized intervals over several hundreds of meters. How do those play into the results of that geophysical survey that you reported on in June 2022 with that anomaly around the two?
Yep. In each of the first two releases, we had one hole that was in the center of the anomaly that correlated extremely well, matched very well with the geophysical anomaly, and is exactly what we expected. And each hole also had a peripheral hole that was testing the far southern margins of the system, and both of those holes came back more weakly mineralized as we defined kind of the outer margins. Most of our drilling from here out will focus in the main part. It'll be 200-meter grid drilling of the known mineralization with a pretty high probability of mineralized intercepts. And I think I'd like to take this moment to also point out, for those that might want to find out more about our drill results in the project in general, there are a series of videos that you can access from our website, many of them done through webinars like this or done through in-house videos that we put out, and where Kevin Heather, our Chief Geological Officer, goes through the results hole by hole, and also has some great information on there that just describes our philosophy, how we work, the type of data we collect, the importance we put into geologic data is kind of the fundamental cornerstone for anything that goes on the project going forward. So I'd please make reference to those videos that are on our website. They're great sources for people to take deeper dives into the results. And we try to put those out after every major news release.
And you'll be winding down drilling soon just because it'll be winter in South America. How many meters were completed in this latest drill program, and were they all at Altar Central and Altar East?
This year we focused completely on Altar Central and Altar East, given the attractiveness of this new anomaly and us wanting to quickly see what we really had on the project. We plan to try to drill up to 20,000 meters this year. We will not make that much meterage. We have a little over 12,000 meters right now. We are drilling with the 4 rigs, and the weather's cooperating. We currently have good weather. We typically plan to stop right around the 1st of June. But we'll go longer than that if we can this year. The shortage in meterage on this is primarily due to drill rigs showing up late, as drill companies struggle to be able to deliver the rigs we had under contract, and challenges that we've had with experience of operators and just not being able to move as quickly as we would anticipate in this type of rock. It's a project that drills relatively easily. But with some of the challenges we've had on getting experienced staff and keeping staff on rigs and not losing shifts because of not enough people showing up to work, and some supply chain issues that linger in Argentina as well, it has been quite a challenge, not just for ourselves, but for all of our peers working in the province as well. We have taken some steps to obtain the services of a very experienced drilling supervisor, a fellow that worked for major international companies, including a lot of time in Argentina. And he's come down to help ourselves and help the drilling contractors improve their game. And that's beginning to show results. So we're picking up right now, but we'll still, with luck, we'll make it to maybe 14,000 meters this year, maybe a little more. and that'll probably be what we get this year. And then we'll be back on it just as quickly as we can later this year. We'll open up camp in September, and we anticipate we'll be drilling by October.
Got it. Thank you. And then touching on news flow ahead. So can you give us a bit of a rundown of what news flow we can expect over the next 3 months from the company?
Yep, certainly can. And Kevin has just put out a video this morning that will be on the website shortly that goes through this in much more detail, so you can see the actual locations of the holes. But we've announced 4 holes to date, 2 releases of 2 holes each. We have 4 holes completed pending assays. Those are coming in pretty quickly now, so we anticipate another drill release in the next couple of weeks. And we have 4 holes underway, several of which are nearing total depth, and we might be able to manage to get another hole out of those rigs. So reported 4 holes to date. We have at least 8 holes to come, and those will come in batches of 2 or 3 holes at a time as we get enough holes to release coming out. And all of the drilling for the rest of this season is very much focused in that core area, effectively moving to a 200-meter spacing to truly know about the size and the continuity of the deposit moving forward.
Thank you. And can you just quickly remind us of the cash position of the company?
Yes, currently we just had a number of warrants exercised that were in the money as a result of a financing we did 2 years ago. So 45-cent financing with 70-cent warrants that have come back for us, which provide an extra financing effectively for us. And so with those in hand, we started this month with 7.3 million Canadian in hand. That's enough funding for us to easily complete our drill program this year. Or this season, but for the upcoming season, particularly at the scale we anticipate it'll be, we will be looking for the best alternative on how we finance next year. However, saying that, there's a lot of data we'd like to get on the table. Our current shareholders have paid for us to do the work we're doing right now, and we believe they should receive the results of that. So look forward to a fair amount of news flow before we look toward alternatives to finance moving forward.
Got it. Thank you. And just to wrap up, there's been a lot of M&A activity in the copper space. You touched on that at the beginning. And, looking at a potential future liquidity event, is there any milestone you're really looking to reach at Alta?
Great question. And it's a number of factors in this. You can't will it to happen at a certain time or certain thing, but just some quick observations on it. One, the fundamental issue is whether you have a quality project. That's really where it all starts. You have to have a project that has all the characteristics to be attractive to a major company to acquire. Keep in mind, when they're acquiring a project, they're paying a fair amount of money to acquire the project. They still have to put even more money into building it. So it has to be a strong, robust project. I think we easily have that already with potential for it to become even more attractive as we continue to drill out. And then we need to advance the analysis and de-risk the project. So we show the full size, and then we need to de-risk that by completing a PEA, and more typically getting to about a pre-feasibility stage. And by doing that, we're beginning to show the economic viability of the project, the most logical pathway to develop it, where you get power, water, manpower, what's your permitting status, what's your social condition and your stakeholder approval on the project. All of those are very critical things that we need to continue to do on this project, and each of those adds value as we complete those and move forward. So we wouldn't want to be approached on this project right now. We really want to add that value to it before we get to that stage. And that's fairly standard for this, is to get to about, but say between a PEA and a pre-feasibility stage on the project, and knowing the full size of it going forward as well. It's also best to be in a really robust market price-wise for the M&A to really kick in strongly. We typically see the leading edge of M&A, which I believe we're already seeing in the copper space, consist of major copper miners buying producing assets or buying partners out and merging assets together in districts. That's easy, low-hanging fruit for them and gives immediate access to increased production. That's exactly where we're at right now. When we're seeing groups chase companies like Teck or we're seeing Rio Tinto consolidate the Oyo Tolgoi district, or BHP purchase Oz Minerals. That's very typical of the leading edge of an M&A phase on this. When that sorts itself out, we start to move into those major companies looking to acquire pre-development assets to be able to have new projects to move forward. And most of the major mining companies haven't been particularly good at making discoveries. Quite frankly, our industry is not making many discoveries right now. So these are pretty rare beasts out there. And when a company gets in a position to want to grow, they'll be evaluating all the projects that are like ours right now. And as I mentioned, it's ideal if we have a stronger copper price. It's not necessary. We'll model a project like this with a price that's lower than today's price even to go forward. But when major mining companies are building up a lot of cash reserves, there's a fundamental switch often from when things are tight and low prices are low. Companies focus on dividend return to shareholders and trying to conserve cash and be careful on it. It's actually when they should be buying things, but they're not in a position to do that. When prices go high, they get really cashed up, and the shareholder mentality switches and pushes them towards growth and acquisition of new assets. It's part of the reason why we have cyclicity in our space, in our business on this. We welcome that cyclicity and try to position ourselves to do well. So we think we'll be delivering a project in about 2 years' time, year and a half time, that's going to be one that's very attractive to the majors at a time when they're probably going to be looking for these moving forward. A little farther along, I have a slide that shows just the forecast for copper moving forward. And some of you may not have seen this. Most of you probably have, but the predictions are right now that if the world goes through with the efforts to move to a green energy transition on this, it will require in the next 22 years that we consume as much copper as we've consumed throughout history up to today. And so big companies are going to have to be finding projects to put online to meet that demand. And we hope that we're delivering one that's ideal for them to do going forward. You also have to take into account jurisdiction. Is it a country that allows you to explore and develop projects? I think Argentina historically has not been that, but is moving into that right now. So we'll really want to watch that. And what we'll want to watch is not just our project, but watch some of the neighbors as well, both in Argentina and elsewhere. As companies like ourselves begin to get picked off, that decreases the number of ones that are available and often kind of creates a bit of a rush into when you go. You don't necessarily want to be the first one sold, but you want to be when people start finding it harder to find additional assets moving forward. So I really like the setup we have on this right now. It's I've been through quite a few of these cycles over my years, and we learned a lot when we sold our first company on this. And I think we've got a better asset right now and quite possibly better timing as well.
Exciting. Thank you. And we might have one more audience question to wrap up before we let you go. As the company believes this to be a new multiple porphyry system, can you name maybe a few projects that look similar in terms of geological structure? Thinking of Philo, is that correct?
Okay, I think I see where the question's coming from on this. Philo is a very large system with multiple centers as well, and an extremely large system, but it's fundamentally different than what we have here. It's a less eroded system, so it has much more of what we call a high sulfidation epithermal overprint. And that's where they're getting the majority of those really strong grades from, are up in that high level material that's above it. If that existed at Altar, it's been eroded away and gone. And the difference is when you're in those high sulfidation epithermal environments, fantastic grades. There are some additional metallurgical challenges presented. The copper and gold often comes with deleterious elements. Manageable, but something you have to work around on that. We're more typical of a normal porphyry copper system on this, very similar to, say, Los Pelambres in Chile, just across the border. So a project that has potential to be several billion tons of moderate grade porphyry style mineralization, more plain vanilla, if you will, standard, but that's music to the ears of the big companies. In big porphyries, they operate on volume and they like predictability and constant nature of material. So this one, geologically and size-wise and grade-wise, one analog to take a look at is, say, the Cerro Verde deposit in southern Peru, where they're currently projecting, they're mining to depths now, and they're projecting that their pit will go well in excess of a kilometer, well over 1.2. Tokopala projected to go down to 1.4 kilometers, mining very similar grade to what we're doing, and doing it by having a large volume, which allows them to go forward. Just as a little follow-up in that previous question on when projects get sold on this, the majors need to see at least 100,000 tons of copper produced per year, and they like to see minimum 30-year mine lives, and preferably more to go forward. And not very many projects have that capability of delivering that. That's we clearly have that. This Altar has the potential to be what we refer to as a multi-generational mine, a mine that might go 40, 50, 60 years. And those are what companies are really made by, is those large projects.
All right. Well, thank you so much for the overview and answering all the questions, John. I know you have a busy week ahead of you. So if anybody has any questions that didn't get answered, please reach out to magda@adcap.ca. And thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Take care. All right.
Okay.
Bye now.
Thanks, Magda.
Thank you.